Kambu, first I want to thank you for encouraging me to tell my story. I have a lot to talk about, man. So I don't know if you have enough space in the video to make sure it happens. But as we said, it's not just for me, but mostly for my offsprings, my family circle, my children, my grandchildren, my great grand. Hopefully I live to see those things. I've already seen grandchildren. But I have a lot to say regarding my life. And when you mentioned to me that, you need to tell that story, man. Some people wait. I said, yeah, let's do it right now. It's something I've always wanted to do because I said, I need to write a book about where I came from, my journey, and where I am today. And hopefully somebody will make a movie about it one day. So here you are making a movie, man. So it's been quite a ride. I'm 66 years young now, and I'm still enjoying the ride. I'm seeing the fruits of my labor. My two sons who are doctors as well. Seeing my grandchildren, one 10, one 9, one 6, and one 3. I do believe there's another one on the way right now. So yeah, we're celebrating every day, celebrating life. So I was born in a little village in Trinidad, La Brea. And I remember that we weren't people of great means, meaning that we pretty much live off the land. I was born in 1956. And at that time, it was just about 10, 12 years removed from World War II. So things were hard. My father was a day laborer, my mother a housewife. And together back then, there were 11 children. And I will say there's no TV back then, right? We did have radio. We did have a radio, and we used to listen stuff on the radio. And my father was always well read, and he made sure that everybody read something. He would say, read everything and anything. You'll find something good out of it. The library was about 3 miles away from the house. So on a Saturday, we'll walk down to the library and get books, because my father, they couldn't afford those kind of things, afford books for us. We went to the library. It was free. You borrowed books. You had a library card, you sign out books, and then you take the books back the following weekend and get some more. And the thing about reading was that he said, whatever you read, you have to sit down and explain to me what you read. I need to have an account of it. And to this day, if you look into my cave, man, you'll see hundreds of books in there. All my siblings still read, with a passion, because they recognize, you can enhance your knowledge. It's not that everything you read is gospel, but, with a certain intellect, you get a chance to pick the sense from the nonsense. And we read not just for entertainment alone, but for me, I read because I know I could gather some information I can share with somebody. So here we are in this little house in La Brea, Soul Village, La Brea, Trinidad. And my memory, I go back to my memory, I know I was a fifth child of 11 at that time. And the hospital was about 20 miles away in San Fernando, of all places. There was a hospital in Point Fortin, but it wasn't as well equipped as the one in San Fernando. So all the children, all my siblings then, except for maybe the last 3, were delivered by a midwife in the house. And my mom would say that, she said, you never gave me any trouble. I started having a few labor pains, mild pains. And I sent for the midwife, and by the time the midwife came, you were already there, looking for milk, looking for breast to suck. So it was an interesting, very fascinating childhood, having all these siblings and being in the middle of them all. I had 3 older brothers, 1 older sister, and then a whole string of other siblings after that. My mom was a very good cook. I think that's where my passion for cooking came from. And there came a time when my father was injured. He fell off the house. He was trying to repair the house, fell off the house, and injured his back. He couldn't walk for like 6 months. Couldn't work as well. So she used to cook and bake things and sell to the villagers so we could eat. And back then there was no electricity, no running water. So my father had built a dirt oven, dirt and stone oven, and that's where all the baking took place. So my older siblings, when he was injured, my older siblings helped in that process to bake cake and bread and pone and tarts. And then she will sell these things so we can have, have money to buy things. And when he wasn't working, he worked in the oil fields, of course, but when he wasn't working, on weekends, we'll have to plant gardens with him of corn and peas and dasheen and yam and eddos. And I think back then we hated to do it, but when we reaped the harvest, there was always a lot. And there's some people who told us that were it not for the benevolence of my father and my mother, they wouldn't eat, because even though we thought that we didn't have much, what we had was enough to feed the whole village. And that's what we did. That's why I grew up. I mentioned there was no running water, no electricity. So there was outhouses, we call them latrine. That's what you use. And just think about 11 kids using one latrine. And then, my father was such where, they believe in old folks' remedies. And because of how we grew up, countryside, on a Saturday, everybody had to have a purge, right? So he'll mix a batch of sene and salts and molasses. So one of the most vile tasting things you could think of, right? But everybody had to have a dose of that on a Saturday morning because we ate off the land, like I mentioned. And during mango season, for example, you go in the bush looking for mangoes, right? You get a time to wash no mango. You eat mango from the tree or what fell on the ground. Just wipe it on your clothes and you're good to go. But my father was wise enough to recognize that we could easily pick up parasites and stuff like that. So he made sure we had this intestinal purge every Saturday. And just think about 11 kids trying to use one outhouse, right? Right? And back in them days, we couldn't afford toilet paper. My father, I said he read incessantly, so the newspaper became the toilet paper. So man would line up by the outhouse with a little piece of newspaper in his hand, right? And if somebody's taking too long in the outhouse, man, you just take off running in the bush and find a spot and you just let it go. But memories like that always just, it gave me cause to pause of where I came from. Both my parents were born and raised in St. Vincent. I never got a chance to know my grandparents except one, my mother's father. And the last time I saw him was at my wedding about 43 years ago. He did come with his family and stuff, with his second wife. My father's father was a police officer in St. Vincent. And he had a nickname. They call him Steel Ribs, right? So the first day on the job, they decided to test my grandfather, police officer. And where the police station was located, well, the heart of the town was like a mile away. And there's a big bad John in the town who used to terrorize everybody. So the cops on the force send this new rookie to go fetch this man on foot. No weapon except his baton. So my grandfather went down to find the fella. Right. He got this man and he brought him in. A whole mile. He and the man fight. They fought for a mile. When my father brought his man in, by the time he came to the police station with his captive, his clothes were in tatters. And the man was worse for wear and tear. Because he and my grandfather fought all the way. My grandfather brought him. So all his fellow officers named him Steel Ribs from that day. I understand that he was very severe disciplinarian. My father was an only child. His mother died in childbirth. And then his father passed when my father was about in his teen years. So he and my mom met in St. Vincent. I understand there may be some shenanigans involved in that because my mother's surname is Williams, and my father's surname is also Williams. So I think there may be some family mix-up there, cousin and cousins. So my mom got pregnant by my father when she was 15 and had my first brother when she was 16. And then the others came in quick succession after that. And they moved to Trinidad, settled on the southern part of the island, and that's where all of us were born. My father was very, very gifted with his hands and also a very, very bright man. I will mention that he could create anything with his hands. I mean, build beds that we slept in, cribs for the kids, the babies, furniture. He just created with his own hands. A saw, sandpaper, nails, and stuff like that, and just made furniture because we couldn't afford to buy these things. And some of the things that he produced on the land, corn and peas and stuff like that, he'll trade with the merchant in the store, Chinese merchant. And my father, for example, he'll trade corn and peas for butter or sugar or flour or oil. And of course, the Chinese merchant, he will sell those things to other people. So that's how we live pretty much. The monies he was making as an oil field worker wasn't sufficient. And back in those days, I mean, they paid you almost slave labor, slave wages for the kind of work that you did. So we grew up as a tight-knit group. I went to a little elementary school across the street from the Pitch Lake, but it's still in existence today. Labre EC School. And then I went to secondary school at Vestany Secondary School, which is like a couple of miles away from there. But I mentioned schooling because we were schooled under the old British system. And it was sound for the most part, repetitive for the most part. I can still remember nursery rhymes from a child. And but their form of discipline, I always struggled with that. For example, I mean, if you didn't learn the right way, the right pace, you get beat. If you were late for school, you get beat. If your fingernails were dirty, you get beat. If your hair was uncombed, you get beat, right? So I think at that stage of my life, I always hated school because I couldn't fathom at that age, as a child, 5, 6 years old, and kindergarten, elementary school, I couldn't figure out why you had to be beaten to learn. And then I made a promise to myself that if I ever had kids, nobody's going to beat my children to learn anything. I believe all you have to do is provide the right environment, the right support, and kids will grow and develop. So I hated being in school because I didn't want to be hit and beaten. And for me, it was like, I consider double punishment in the sense that we walked to and from school quite a ways. But before school, you have plants to take care of. I mentioned the garden, we had a plant, you had the wet plants and stuff like that. And weed the plants before you leave to go to school. And there are goats to take care of, and cow, and those kind of chickens and pigs. So our day started early, very early in the morning. And because there's no running water in the house, the villagers congregated at the standpipe and fill up cans to take them back home. Several trips until you fill up the barrels, 55-gallon barrels of water, so we can use during the day for bathing, cooking, those kind of things. So by the time daybreak comes, you're already tired from all the work that you did. And even then, I was saying to myself, one day I might have children, but they will not endure the kind of hardship that I endured. I know I had to do better. And my father instilled in us that we, all his children, had to do better than he did. I think he was driven to the point where, he didn't accept failure in anything. And I think that rubbed off on me. As we talk about my life story, I'll tell you how that rubbed off on me and what it did for my life. So, we are doing this myriad of things before daylight. Daylight come, you take care of all the chores, you rushed the breakfast that mom prepared, and then you start running to school. If you get to school sweaty, you get beat. Right? If you're late for walking too soon and get sweaty, you get beat. I remember Principal Trutman and then Principal Byron, they'll line up all the latecomers, man, and they'll have a whip or a strap and beat the hell out of you. Right? And, back then, I think I experienced hate because I couldn't fathom why be beaten after all the stuff. And my point is that these people, they knew, these are high school this school principal, they knew the kind of lifestyle that we were living. They knew the struggle of people of color back then, living those kind of lives where every day is a struggle. And there was no compassion. I couldn't fathom that. So despite that kind of environment, we found ways to excel. And I commend my father that, he made sure we read everything and anything. On a Sunday, we will get a chance to play with our friends. And when my mom was done cooking by 11, she'd call us to go deliver food to the elderly around the village because she always cooked a lot. And after that, we'll bathe by 1, 2 o'clock. We had a bath. And we'll come in for the day. And we'll do homework, we'll read, and my father will turn on the radio. And back then, there wasn't, on a Sunday, you couldn't play any kind of secular music on the radio. Back then, you couldn't play like a calypso or love song, not on a Sunday, That's how crazy the lifestyle was back then. So my father tuned into classical music. So here we are sitting there reading, and there's easy classical listening music in the background. And I will never forget that kind of environment because it encouraged us to just be in a comfortable, quiet place where we can learn. Right now in my cave, I've got tons of classical CDs, some I haven't even listened to yet, but it came from that. A bit more about my father. He was a hard man. I think hard times create hard people to do hard things. So he told me a story. He said, son, he died when he was 77, but he was like 74, telling me this story. He said, I never told this story to anybody else. I'll tell it to you because one day you can tell it. And here I'm telling that story, right? He goes, I used to work at I think it was Fetchem or Shell or oil company, but he was a gauger. He'll check the tanks levels from time to time. And there was this whole shift that he'd go on the hour, every hour and check these things. He worked a midnight shift, called it the graveyard shift. And on this particular day, he told my mom he's going to leave early. He could watch a couple of movies. Back then, you sit in the movie from 8 o'clock until 11:30. Watch 2 movies, right? So he said he's in line at 7:30 trying to get his movie tickets. And everybody pushing and rushing to get tickets and get a better seat because nobody want to be sitting in pit. They call it, you have pit, you got house, you got balcony, right? They used to call it back then. And if you get a worse ticket, you sitting in pit, worse seats, but you're right under the screen, so you're looking up like this. He didn't want that, so everybody's pushing to get a better seats a little further back. And he said, Suddenly he feel this harsh lash on his back. Turn around, there's a police officer with a baton. He turned to the cop, he said, "Why did you hit me?" He said, the police officer said, "You need to stop pushing." So my dad goes, "What, everybody here pushing? Why you singling me out?" And, with that, I recognize that because you're a natural born leader, like my father was, like I am, like my sons are, those who are in tune will always target the leader to quell the rest of the herd, the rest of the pack. So he got hit. So once they recognize he got hit, everybody will kind of pipe down. I experienced it in school, in the military, wherever I went. And my sons experienced the same thing. They just come on and said, "How come they was picking?" I said, "You're a leader, you lead." I said, "You consider the class clown, right?" So teachers now who are wise will pick on you to shut you down so everybody's going to fall down. So he said, got a hit on his back. They also said to him, "Since you opened your mouth, you want more?" My father said, he said, "No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm just going to chill out." So he said, he waited in line, gave his ticket. And he went to his movie after he went to work. He says, "Son, every day for 3 months, I trailed this police officer to learn his beat, his whereabouts, where he goes, where he stops." So he said he had a habit of stopping in certain places, somebody to take a piss, to relieve himself, or just to chat with somebody at some night spot. He said, "I mark him in the dark. I followed him for 3 months. On this fateful night, when I have had enough of it, I got one big stone. As he walked by me," he said he was only like less than 10 feet away from me. As he walked by me, he said, I whacked him one in the back of his head. I said, "You did what?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I stood over him lying on the ground all cold. And I said to him," he said, he couldn't hear me, but I said to him, "That's for hitting me that night. Now you get it back." He said, "I went to work that night. I got up to work at 11. And the boys on the job said, 'Hey, Willie, you come to relieve us early, man?' I said, yeah, man. You guys go and spend some time with your family. I'll take over from here." He picked up the shift early, an hour early. When the rest of the shift arrived at 11:45, close to 12, he said, "Willie boy, trouble in point." He said, "What happened?" He said, "Man, somebody knocked down a police officer. And the man up in the hospital, the man in the hospital right now. So the whole point full of police trying to find this man who almost killed a police officer." I said, "So wait." He said, well, boy, I hope they find him, boy." Right? He goes like that. And then here at the refinery, back in 72, when there was a big strike, and he wasn't a supervisor yet, but he did some ninja stuff with people trying to broke the line, right, to go to work. Yeah, he and a crew became goons. I used to take down people who were trying to cross the line. But he was like that. He was just a different kind of man. And I think I adopted a lot of his ways. He was very, very intelligent. And I think my mom was just as smart, man. I said if they had formal education, they'd be dangerous, both of them. Because my mom had a memory like you can't imagine. And she'll do math in her head she don't need any paper, right? The old man when he worked at the refinery, he'll bring home the blueprint from the refinery and sit at the dinner table after dinner and just study them. So he knew the entire refinery inside out. When he became maintenance superintendent of the east side of the refinery, he had a crew of 400 men working under him. And his underlings include like 4 engineers who went to school for education. They were his subordinates because he was so bright So brilliant. The same thing goes for my oldest sibling. He passed away now, about 12 years or more. No, more than that. But Reno was, I consider him a genius. A lot of people think I'm the smart one in the family. I said, I was nowhere close to Reno, man. He went to Naparima School in San Fernando, one of the best schools in the country. Just a brilliant, brilliant man. I had some math problems that even my teacher in secondary school couldn't figure out. And I'll bring it home, and Reno will he said, man, this is simple. That's the kind of man he was. So there was Reno, who was the oldest boy. Maurice was 1 year younger. Maurice was a rebel without a cause. And his motto was live fast and die young. And he passed away in the military at age 28 or 29. And Hezron, there was Hezron. He lives in Texas right now. My sister Noreen, 1 year older than I am, and then me. And then the rest of them came. So we lived in this house, and then we were a gang among ourselves, in the sense that we all walked to school together, like I said before. But nobody messed with us. Because my father said, he said, look out for each other. Always look out for each other. Be each other's best friends. Function as a team. He said, as long as you live, always look out for each other. And that's what we are now. I mean, we know 60s, 70, and we have a thread where we text back and forth several times a week, just keeping in touch with everybody, helping and encouraging and stuff like that. So the kids in the village now, they recognize that we were a formidable team. So all the kids gravitated to us for protection, because we were like a gang. Reno told me one time, he said one time, there's a man in Subo. All the kids used to call him, man, Pinhead. I don't know what they call him, man, Pin. Man, probably have a small head, right? And the man didn't like it. So one day they were walking home, and all the kids started yelling, Pinhead, Pinhead. And the man picked up some stones and pelted stone behind the children. And he hit my two brothers, two of them got hit with the stones. So they came home and told my father. My father said, oh, really? He said, okay, let's go back down the road. So Willie took his two sons and walked back down to Pinhead's house. Before he got there, he broke two green whip on the side of the road. And he gave one to Maurice, and he gave one to Reno. And Willie walked up the man's step into his house with his two sons. And he said, I heard you throw some rocks behind my sons and hit them. He said, nobody does that to my sons. I want you to understand that it's not going to happen again. But he inside the man's house with his two sons. He told my two older brothers, he said, hit him back. Earl said, they look at Willie, are you serious? He said, yes, hit him. Earl said, hit the man 3 with the whip. Maurice do the same thing, 3. My father said, hit him again. So them boys went off on him a couple more times with some more whip lashes, right? And then when they're done, he tell the boys to go outside. And he told Mr. Pinhead, you're so lucky that you're only getting it from little boys. If it happens to my sons or any of the kids in the village, a big man will take you down. That's me. He said, you don't want me coming after you. So it never happened after that. So the village life was very colorful in that regard. And when it came time where we petitioned the electric company, called TN Tech, right? That we need to have electricity. My father took the lead and got all the men of the village to come together on a Sunday morning for several weeks to chop the bushes and trees that will block the planting of electrical poles and running wires. He took the lead in that. He always led in that regard. And it was accomplished. When it was accomplished, we petitioned the electrical company and they came and run lines. And that's how we finally got electricity after a while. But the company wasn't going to do it on their own. But my father took the lead. And in the meantime, he was also making decisions to move from Trinidad to St. Croix because he recognized, he heard word that they're getting ready to build this huge refinery on the South Shore. Amarada Hess was going to do it. And they didn't have skilled workers here in the Virgin Islands to make it happen. So they decided to go down to Trinidad to recruit people, not just in Trinidad, but also Antigua, St. Lucia, Dominica, those places. So in 1966 is when he first came here. Before that, he worked in Antigua for a little while. But 66 is when he first came here. I first saw the island in 1968. So came here, brought the family one by one. My mother never liked it here. So eventually that was to the undoing of their relationship. They got divorced after a while. And with me, he didn't want me to leave the school that I was attending in Trinidad, Vesney Secondary School, which was also one of the best schools in the nation then, still is now, I think ranked in the top 3. And I mentioned before that I hated school because all my siblings were here in St. Croix. My father, my mother was there, my 3 younger sisters were there. So I became the man of the house early, taking care of my younger sisters. And washing their clothes, ironing their clothes, baking, cleaning, protecting them, helping with homework, right? All those different kind of things. And so I rebelled in school. I never did any homework. And back then, to have done well in school means that when examination time come, like when you sit for exams, GCE, General Cambridge examination, written by University of Cambridge, and you sat those examinations, and then you either pass or fail certain subjects. You get a grade for the things that you studied. I only passed 3 subjects. I have friends who pass 10, 11, 12 subjects. I passed 3. So in that regard, if people know I became a doctor after a while, and it's like, what? I'm only passed with 3 subjects, he's a doctor. But what happened was that as much as I didn't like to be there, I never skipped school. I was sat and listened. So everything that was taught in school remained right there. So after my military experience, I went back to college, everything just came flowing back, man. Physics, the chemistry, the biology, all the Spanish. I got A's in all those things because my psyche, my intellect absorbed it and kept it when I needed it. To the point I was tutoring math and physics and chemistry in college at a university level when I was doing my pre-med studies. So a fascinating journey in that village. Lots of friends who we grew up with, who are men and women now, grandparents now. I still keep in contact with some of them. I keep in contact with a lot of people I went to school with at Vesney Secondary School and also Library EC School. I met my sweetheart, Cindy Williams, at Vesney Secondary School. Stole my first kiss when I was like 13 years old and she was 12. And when we got married, I was 23 and she was 22. But I do believe in divine order. And were it not for Cindy in my life as my best friend, my spouse, I wouldn't be able to see a Sheldon or a Jason and I'll see my grandkids. I probably would have had other grandkids and other people who I call sons or daughters. But I think the divine order was for me to see these 2 men who are doctors now and see them, see the essence of myself in them. You know, I've talked about it before, Kamui. Yeah, to see my essence in them and look at where they have come from, where I have come from, and just look at their journey and just see, the success of my life manifested in theirs. and also to see the success of my little grandchildren as they now begin to grow and become and develop.